I show you a die-cast GTO model that you've probably never seen before. I let you know where I'm going to be moving in the very near future, and it's a celebration of 7 years and 50 episodes of the show. I'm going to show you every upgrade I've ever made to the GTO on this episode of Josh's Car Corner. So here it is, late 2017, and it's about 7 years and 3 weeks to the day that I uploaded the very first episode of Josh's Car Corner, filmed in my garage with a Sony Handycam using the camcorder mic with echoey garage audio and all the cars driving by. I've learned a lot in the 7 years I've been doing the show since then, and I've tried to upgrade the quality a little bit and give you a better viewing experience, and hopefully I've done that. Just crossed over 1,500 subscribers about a month ago. It's actually up to 1,550 now. I'm actually surprised by that. I can't believe people are that interested in a 10-year-old imported Holden car from Australia. Half of people don't even know it's from Australia. It's a wonder to me that people watch the show and are entertained by it. But once again, thank you everybody for watching these last 7 years. I hope I've entertained you. I hope I've taught you something about cars and the GTOs in general and all the Holden cars. And I hope you continue to watch and enjoy the show, because it's going to keep going. I'm going to keep doing Holdens and GTOs. I've got a lot of cool ideas for future things to do. And the first thing I should mention is where I'm going to be doing them. Because if you watched the little update video I made a couple weeks ago, I did say I was going to be moving, and it's time to come clean. I can't deny it anymore. I'm going back to Arizona. It took being away from there to realize all the cool car things I was leaving behind. And while Wisconsin is beautiful and I love it and it'll always be my home, Arizona's got a lot more opportunity. Not just for me to work and make money to do things to this car, but also the car scene is that much cooler. It's close to California, it's closer to Vegas, and they're also always hosting car things that I want to do. Just a little hint, SEMA, I want to go. We'll see if that happens. That's where I need to be to do what I want to do with cars. So I decided that's where I'm going to go back to. I'm excited about it, and I just want to let you know right now that I've already got plans to go to a car show out there that's going to be happening in Tucson on November 5th. It's an all Pontiac car show, and I was invited to attend by the guy who owns the XXX GTO Flame car, because he lives in Tucson and he's an organizer of the show. He's even putting in the promotional material for the car show that I'm going to be there. So if you want to meet me and you want to see some really cool Pontiacs, including the XXX Flame car, come out to that car show, because I'm going to be there on November 5th. So I already shot all the footage of all the upgrades I did to the car. So I'm going to take you back in time about 2 weeks here and show you every single upgrade that I've ever done to this particular Pontiac GTO. So very first thing I want to point out is this arrowhead, which is not the factory arrowhead. This is a part that was made by a company no longer in existence called Billet Prototypes. This is a piece of billet aluminum that is cut, and then it's painted it with the red arrowhead in the center. Because as we all know, the plastic arrowheads tend to fade out quite fast, and this one has stayed a little, it's faded a little bit, but it stayed pretty clean. Now, these aren't strictly mods, but after the accident in 2011 where the lady rear-ended me, the front bumper cover, the grills, the headlights, and the fog lamps are all new as of 2011, as well as the hood. The hood had to be replaced too. The fenders were okay. However, this one I did have replaced, because under here where you can't see it in this corner where the bumper clips underneath, it was all messed up from the first people to fix it before I bought the car. So this fender is actually not the original fender either. So let's pop the hood here, and I'll start pointing things out under here. This is where I usually get a lot of the questions. So it is the LS2 engine that came with the car. However, it has been heavily modified. So let's just start with things you can see. Obviously, we've got the Veraram air intake setup in here. That was put in 2011. And it's got a factory LS2 throttle body. However, it's been ported by a company in Indiana, and I wish I could remember the name of who did it, but it charged me $140 some to get this and just exchange mine for this one. This behind it here is it looks like a spacer, but it's another part by Merriman. It's called a power wedge, and it's not a straight cut piece of plastic. It's thick on the top, but thin on the bottom. And the idea is it rotates the throttle body forward, because if you ever looked at a throttle blade on an LS2, when it's wide open, it's not straight horizontal. It's actually a little bit like that. It never goes fully horizontal. So tipping the throttle body forward actually gets you to a situation where you have a fully horizontal throttle body, and the spacer gives you a little bit more plenum volume, and it gives you a perfectly horizontal butterfly so you can get the maximum amount of air into the engine. This is the factory intake that came on the car. However, it has also been port matched to the heads and hogged out a little bit on the inside, so it does flow a little bit better. These valve covers are Holley valve covers made for the LS, and these got put on when I upgraded the engine in 2014, and I've just noticed recently that after 3 years the seals around the bolts, which hide under the coils now, are starting to leak a little bit of oil, so I'm going to have to get some new seals from Holley on that one. Let's just back away for a second here. Let's focus on this strut tower brace. This is a BMR suspension strut tower brace. I got this from a guy when I was living in Madison. He had a shop next to the diesel shop I used to work at, and they modified a GTO back in the day, and they had a ton of parts that I got from him that they never put on that car. This was one of them, so I got this for like 50 bucks, which was a steal back then. Working back down into the engine here, these spark plug wires are not factory. I actually had these made by a guy on eBay. He will make you MSD 8.5 mil wires to any length you need, and with whatever boot you want on them for whatever exhaust setup you have. So for headers, those are a heavy duty boot that is resistant to melting when you have exhaust headers on the system. Now these headers were on the car when I bought it. These are from a company called Stainless Works, and it's their first version of their headers for the GTO, which actually have a design flaw on the driver's side where they come around the steering rod. If you have factory engine mounts, the engine can actually lean over and the headers can actually rock into the U-joint for the steering rod, and it can actually inhibit your ability to turn to the right when you're going around a corner. So the engine mounts are actually from Hinson Supercar. They are a polyurethane engine mount that you can't really see, but it's in there. And it's just it's a compromise between the Team SCSS really hard mount and the factory mount, and they actually raised the engine up about 1/4 of an inch and completely eliminated the issue I had with the steering rack getting interfered with by the headers. Everything else on the engine is pretty original except for the water pump. I had to replace that earlier this summer. The factory one, after 10 years or 11 years, started leaking, and there's no fixing them, you just have to replace them. So that's a Delco replacement part. You cannot get a factory GM part for this car anymore on a water pump unless you want to pay like $400, which I didn't want to do. Okay, so let's focus on the front wheel and front suspension. Now you guys saw me put these wheels on back in the spring, as well as these new brakes. These are the VMR V810 FF wheels that I put on this spring, the flow-formed wheels, which are a little bit lighter than the 710s and also have a slightly different design than the 710s do. And also I repainted the factory calipers. They used to say GTO and then PBR down there, and now they just say Pontiac in a nice clean font right there. And also put on these EBC GD series rotors at the same time. And the nitrotherm coating that was on them is all wore off where the pads engaged, but it's still on the sections on the hat here and everywhere else on the rotor, so the rotor isn't going to rust and look ugly in a couple of years' time. It'll stay nice and black and keep a nice clean look in there. And I put these black wheel nuts on too, as opposed to going with some sort of silver that wouldn't have looked as nice against what this badge. And I just think it would have looked a little different, so not quite right. So I like the black better. Now I got my phone out here because I want to do some photos too of underneath the car, the suspension, because all the suspension's been upgraded underneath the car too. So let's just go over here. So starting in the front suspension here, under the car, we've got the radius rod bushings. I believe these are Lovell's radius rod bushings, and what's cool about them is they're adjustable. You get a series of washers when you install them, and you can stack washers on either side of this bushing. By doing that, you can either pull the radius rod forward or move it backward. And when you do that, you're actually changing the caster of the front wheel. So by the factory, you get about 8 degrees of positive caster. With this setup, you can go 9 degrees or even a little bit more. And you can have it anywhere in between too, moving it about 1/4 of a degree at a time. So I have it set about 8.8 degrees. I've run 9 before. Last time I took it to a suspension shop, they dialed it back to 8.8, and I don't know why they did that, but it's really nice because it gives you nice straight line stability when you're driving the car. Now going back here, we've also got the sway bar, which is factory, but I've got poly bushings on all the pickup points. And then there's poly on the inside of the control arm link there too on both sides. So everything in the front suspension is all poly now. The components, the metal parts are factory, but all the bushings are poly. This is a BMR skid plate that they used to make. I don't know if they still make it. The factory skid plate's about 15 pounds. This plate is 5 pounds. So you take 10 pounds off the front of the car, and that's a huge benefit when you start stacking other weight-saving measures in the front end to making the front end lighter, making the car handle a lot better. Last thing I want to focus on the front suspension is the BC coilovers that are in there. I put those on in I think about 2013 just to replace the factory stuff which was wore out. Try to give the car a better control and better handling, and they definitely work, but they are extremely stiff, and I think my poly strut tower bushings have worn out and have compressed because I get some pretty hard shocks over some bumps in the car now, and I think I'm going to have to put some new poly strut tower bushings up in the top of the suspension. Okay, so that's the front suspension. Let's go over to the inside of the car here. There's not a whole lot done in here with the exception of the airbag here. It's just a factory one. However, that is not the original airbag that came in the car. The original one is sitting in Colorado at Randy Reese's shop, Left Hand Utes. I mentioned to him that the logo on my airbag was all wore out and I didn't like it. It was all faded, and I wondered if he had another one laying around, and he did. So for 10 bucks he swapped me a different airbag with a different arrowhead that's a lot cleaner and shinier. The only other things to mention in the interior are the radio. You'll see this cord coming out of this hole right here. That's not factory. This was modded by Bowman Customs down in Chicago. What they do is they take this, which is normally a security locking mount, and they hide a 1/4-inch microphone jack behind it, and then he solders it into the radio in such a way that when you plug something in here, it now has control no matter what device you have turned on, FM, AM, CD. This has control. So I'll plug my phone in here on road trips and listen to music and get my navigation and phone all through that. And it's a $50 upgrade, and it's a way better thing to do than modifying the radio if you want to do things on the cheap and keep everything looking factory. One thing you'll notice right here is this little dot. That is a little LED indicator for my wideband No2 sensor, which kind of hides under the shifter right in this area right here. The control box is down here and all the power wiring is under here. And if you look in my center console here, mind this charger, that right there is the reset button for the wideband sensor. In case I ever have to put a new sensor in or recalibrate it for O2, that is the reset button I put in. The last thing worth mentioning is in the back here. This is one of the things I did about 5 years ago, the rear seat delete. This is literally from a company called rearseatdelete.com. Sent me this kit, and it just takes the back seat out, and then I put some Dynamat behind it and a little bit extra padding to quiet it down and support it a little better. This took about 37 pounds out of the back of the car and just helped to lighten it up. And now I have usable storage back here, because anybody who has a GTO knows that you don't have a lot of storage space in the trunk because there's a fuel cell sitting back there, which takes up quite a bit of trunk space. One thing I do need to mention in the middle of the car here, which you can't really see, but I'll try to show you, is the transmission. The mount has been replaced with it's another brand new factory mount that was put in 2014, but it's got a poly insert in it from RevShift to stiffen it up and keep the shifter from bouncing around on you as you drive. I don't know if I can get under the exhaust here and you can really see it. So above that mount is where it is. And the other thing to mention is, people have asked me how I disabled the skip shift. Well, you can do that in the computer, and a lot of people do that, but I've actually physically removed the solenoid from the transmission that disables the skip shift, and I've replaced it with, of all things, an oil drain plug from a 1984 Dodge Omni. It's got the right dimensions and the right thickness and depth to the thread pattern to put in there, and I just put a nylon washer on it to seal it, and that blocks it off, and it's completely removed from the transmission. So talking about the rear suspension, that is one of the pickup points for the rear cradle. That's got a poly bushing in it from Petters, and just about everything back here has got poly bushings now. A couple of years ago in Arizona, you saw me replace the rear control arm bushings with the Petters stuff to help cure the wheel hop, and that also, in effect, fixed the camber issues I was having back here forever and ever too. The tow rods are factory, and someday I might upgrade those to heavier duty ones because they are factory, and they don't really have any adjustment anymore. They have adjustment, but it's broken. It's all rusted up, and it doesn't really turn anymore. And also the diff mount is a factory diff mount, and it's a factory diff cover, but it's also got a poly insert in it from Petters to stiffen it up a little bit. And every bushing in the rear suspension is now poly. Again, the VMR wheels, and we got the painted and updated rotors and brakes in there. Going under the car here is where things get a little more interesting. So last year, I put the G-Force level 2 anti-wheel hop axles in that I bought from that guy, and I've also got the billet stubs going into the differential now after I broke that one doing the hot rod drag weekend last April. I've also got Coney yellow adjustable shocks in the back, and I can put a tool on the top of the shock and I can adjust both the damper and rebound at the same time infinitely. It's just a wheel that you turn, it doesn't click or anything. Back there, that little piece of blue, you can see that is the yoke adapter that is on my carbon fiber drive shaft that I got from DSS last year too. That now transitions the power from the transmission back to the differential, replacing that single piece of aluminum I had, replacing the factory one, which is garbage. The exhaust is a MagnaFlow 2.5-inch system without cats. It has a cat delete system on it. Originally, there were cats on there, but one was hollow and one wasn't, so it's like a half-assed job that somebody did trying to put it all together. So I just put straight pipes in there to make it all flow evenly and properly. So then finally going back here, 06 taillights, which makes sense because this is an 06. But the funny thing is, when I bought the car, it had 05 taillights on it. Because when it was fixed the first time, they got all the parts to make the repairs off an 05 Torrid Red. So they used the 05 taillights too. I picked these up from a guy in Florida 2 years ago, and then I put LED bulbs in everything here, and actually all the bulbs in the car are LED. But I did an episode, I think it was the Smorgasbord episode, where I talked about putting in the little resistor back here to make the brake lights work properly so it didn't interfere with the brake control module. So everything here is LED. That's a flex fuel badge I put in I think October of 2015 after it got fixed after a little mistake on the right-hand corner there where I backed into a truck. They never put the Pontiac badge back on, and I put an alcohol sensor in, so I had this flex fuel badge put on instead. So this is a whole setup I had to make. Comes off the hard line from under the car here, comes over the brake booster, makes a 90, or a little bit more of a 90, into the sensor, which is then pinned into the ECU right here, and which pin it is varies depending on what year you've got, actually what part of the year. You can only do this on 05 and 06 cars, unfortunately. You can't do it on an 04. But depending on which year you've got, it's a different pin on either pin or connector 2 or connector 3 of the harness. From there it comes back underneath the brake and clutch reservoirs here and then up into the engine. So then that is reading the alcohol content, which then the computer can then modify how much ignition advance to give to the whole timing system. So when it detects more alcohol, it gives me more timing, gives me a little more low-end torque, more power, and the engine runs a heck of a lot cooler too when it's running on ethanol. This badge over here on the right is actually off a Holden VE Commodore. It's supposed to go down on the bottom of the front fender in Australia on a VE Commodore. And then you've all seen the Holden on license plate. This is another billet prototype's arrowhead right here. This is another billet aluminum piece that he did that's painted in there dark red, and it's held up a lot longer. This is the factory rear bumper lower insert. The only thing is I've got these stickers in here, these colored stickers to insert in here so you can actually see the word GTO, because from the factory it's black and you can barely see it when you're driving along. I used to have silver stickers in there, but they got all white and shrank and faded and didn't look very good. So this is a new darker gray that I think works a little better. So that is about every single modification I've done to this car over the last 7 years. And it's got 126,000 miles on it. There's almost 40,000 miles on that engine build that I did in 2014. And it just keeps on ticking, and so do I. So now you've seen every upgrade that I've ever made to this GTO. Now let's take a look at something a little smaller. Remember I told you that I came across a really cool die-cast model in the intro? This is it. I picked this up when I was down at the POCI convention with Joe. This, if you've never heard about it, is made by, it's supposedly American Muscle, but it's actually an Ertl collectible. So at the Iowa die-cast foundry where they make all the die-cast cars, they were made. This is a limited edition 2004 GTO. Even though it's got the factory 18s on it, as you can see there, this is a 2004 model because it doesn't have the louvers cut into the hood, and it has the single exhaust on the back. But what's cool about this is this was a production run. They only made 5,000 die-cast models in total, but what's unique about this one, and maybe you've been able to see it already, is this is what's called a chase car. And what that means is it is unpainted metal. It may look like it's silver and Quicksilver metallic, but it's not. Especially if you compare the door to the front fender, it is not painted. So the idea behind this model is you buy it, you paint it the color you want to paint it, and then you can have your car in your color. Now this one does have, like I said, have the factory 18s on it, and it's also got a red interior. So it might be kind of limiting for somebody who wants it. The other thing that's interesting is it has a Massachusetts license plate on the back that says 527 FWQ, which is almost foot torque or foot wheel horsepower, which is weird. I bought this kind of as a flight of fancy because I thought it's so cool and I'm never going to see another one of these again. But here's the thing. I don't know how to paint a die-cast model. And I'm sure there are plenty of people out there who know more what they're doing and would be excited to have this model for their own. So this is actually for sale. And if you would like to purchase it, you can buy it from me for $100 plus shipping. And I will ship it to you because I don't think you're ever going to see another one. GTO die-cast models are pretty rare on their own, and more often than not they have factory 17-inch wheels and they don't have a red interior. So if you have a car with a red interior and factory 18s and you want to have a replica of your car for car shows or for your mantle or whatever, get in touch with me. I will send this to you because I think somebody else could paint this thing up properly and make it look right and have the copy of their car that they've always wanted to take to car shows or whatever they want to do. So if you want this car, let me know. So that's going to wrap this episode up. I've come a long way in the last 7 years and 50 episodes, and I've had a lot of adventures with this car, and I plan on having a lot more, and I plan on continuing to film them for you to show you what you can do with these cars and show you how much fun they can be. And I thought it'd be cool to send this video out the same way I sent the first video out, by me just driving away. I'm not going to do a burnout right now though. Instead, what I'm going to do is show you a burnout I did just a couple days ago at Pontiac Adventures. I had some old tires. In fact, they were the old tires that were on this thing last year. And if you remember from the video where I put the wheels on the car in the spring, the tires in the back had 0 tread left on them. And that's what I was burning out on. So instead of pedal to the metal, waiting until they explode and tearing the car to bits, what I decided to do was more of a slow, controlled burn that went a long time. So I hope you enjoy that. And I'll show you that right now. So once again, thanks for watching Josh's Car Corner. We'll see you next time. That thing does good donuts, man. Thanks again for watching the show. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and if you're on Instagram, be sure to keep track with me there too, at Josh's Car Corner.